Damos inicio. Bueno, nos vamos otra vez acá. Ya, ahora sí.
Okay, I see.
Ahora vamos a hacer, por
Very
favor,
good.
que ya vamos a hacer, ya empezamos a trabajar.
We have 10 people already.
I'm gonna give it a minute. Okay, I'm going. It's gonna be delayed, okay?
We have 13 people.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our National English Teaching Conference. It's so lovely to have you in this online session. I'm very honored to be here. My name is Joana Melo, and I'm the Academic Director at Centro Colombo Americano, Bogota. It is my pleasure to host this session and introduce today's speaker, who will guide us in exploring the vital role of social emotional learning within English language teaching. I want to especially thank Macmillan Education, part of Springer Group, for supporting um, our presenter for today, Dr. Luis Penton Herrera. Thank you for being here. I He's going to be leading us today with his presentation, Socio-Emotional Learning as a Core Literacy in English Language Teaching. And before we start, I want to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Pentan Herrera. He is an award-winning Spanish and English educator and a best-selling author. In 2024, he was elected as a TESOL Teacher of the Year, awarded by the TESOL International Association and National Geographic Learning. Dr. Penton Herrera is a professor at Vizia University in Poland, a book series editor and co-editor. And most importantly, his current teaching and research projects are situated at the intersection of identity, emotions, and well-being, a topic that we are very interested in the ELT world. Dr. Penton Herrera emphasizes how fostering empathy, resilience, and well-being can enrich the classroom experience, and he will tell us more about how to ensure that learners thrive, not only linguistically, but personally and socially in the classroom. So, welcome, Dr. Penton Herrera. The floor is yours. Thanks for being here with us today.
Joanna, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation to you, to Macmillan, and for the opportunity to be here. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And thank you for joining us. So I'm sharing now the screen. And Joanna, just to double check, can you see my screen and the presentation?
I can see your screen and your presentation, Doctor.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. So again, my name is Luis Javier Penton Herrera. Today we're going to be talking about social emotional learning as a core literacy in English language teaching. And I like to start always with stories. So I'm going to share with you a story that I like to share with many, many people. And I was born and raised in Cuba. So at the age of 17, I went to the US. And when I went to the US, I remember vividly. Of course, I did not know any English, so I had to learn English from scratch. Nothing, not even colors, numbers, nothing. And at the age of 17, I started learning. But I remember vividly this time where I was in the classroom and the teacher was speaking, and I don't know what she was saying because it was in English, but I did hear the word library. And library, I had remembered that word from before. So library, computers, because I knew they had computers there, or the library, we went there, they had computers. And then, but I remember sitting down because back then only in the library they had computers, not in the classroom. And these are the computers that they had, so that was a long time ago. And I remember just sitting there in front of the computer, and of course, as a language learner, you're always aware that you have to learn English, especially in a new environment where English is spoken as the national or the most commonly used language, right? And but just sitting in front of the computer at that point, I realized that I wanted to cry a little bit because all my colleagues and my classmates were working, but I did not know how to turn on the computer. And I just sat there wanting to cry as a 17-year-old student because I didn't know how to turn on the computer. I didn't speak the language, and I didn't have the vocabulary to understand that I needed to learn different forms of literacy in addition to language, right? But I did know, I realized at that moment, even though I didn't have the language, that I was very much behind my peers. I did not have computer skills. I did not know how to turn on the computer. I did not know how to function in the school community, and I did not know the language, right? So this story, I always share it with my colleagues and my students because in the language classroom, and this is really my belief as language teachers, we have more responsibility than just teaching conjugation and the verb to be and these wonderful things that are essential for language teaching and learning. We also have the responsibility to teach students the skills, the literacies they're going to need to function, to be successful in our learning environments, but also outside in the real world. I mean, imagine if I didn't have learned computer skills back then when I was 17, I wouldn't be doing the presentation online today. Imagine that, right? So again, technological skills, literacies, technological literacies are essential for today's world, right? Same as other forms of literacies. So let me go here. You may or may have not heard about literacy, so I'm going to very briefly introduce you to it and different forms of literacies in our conversation. I'll go through some of them, and then I'm going to focus a little bit towards the end into the social and emotional literacies, which is really the conversation, okay? So literacies is about using our skills to interact with, interpret, and engage with the world around us. Okay, so again, imagine 17-year-old Luis. I did not have the skills, the abilities to engage with my school environment. I didn't. I didn't know anything about computers. I didn't have any technological skills. I didn't know how to turn on a computer back then, so I didn't know how to do, they would often ask like PowerPoint presentations or Microsoft Word document presentations. I didn't know how to do that, right? So again, literacy skills is the abilities that we have to interact with the world around us. If we have more literacies, more skills, more abilities, the better we're going to be. So language is only one part of the equation, okay? So I want us to think about that. Now, do we consider ourselves literate? So I want you to think about this as we go through the conversation. I cannot see your comments in the chat, but we will come back to it at the end. So for right now, as I go through the conversation, please write your comments and your questions in the chat box, and then we're going to come back to them later, okay, after the presentation. But do you consider yourself to be literate? Yes? No? Why? Okay, I'm gonna play two games here with you, or two different. I have two different examples just for you to think about. Okay, here we go. And we're teachers, so we should be literate, right? So, do you know what these signs mean? So, imagine you're going into a restroom and you see these two signs. No words, just the signs. What do you go into? You know, I always share these signs as well when we're talking about literacies, because I remember when I arrived in Poland. I live in Poland and I work and live in Poland. And I remember the first time I saw these signs, it was not about the language, it was about reading the signs, right? So is not about reading words themselves, but cultural or culturally embedded practices, right? Some restaurants in Poland have these signs, and you have to figure out which one is which, right? So, ladies, you will go to the circle. Gentlemen, you will go to the triangle, right? But how do you read these signs? Again, if you don't have this cultural literacy, you cannot interact with the world around you, right? So cultural literacy is essential. I wish when I was learning Polish and I was going to Polish class, I'm still learning Polish, but initial level Polish when I was in going into my classes, I wish our teachers would have talked to us about cultural aspects of Poland as well, right? Because a lot of the instruction that I received was just very much grammar translation or memorization of vocabulary and a lot of grammar, right? But very little aspects about culture. But this is essential for me to be able to navigate and interact with my world in Poland, right? Now, also in Polish, look at these words, and do you know what the words mean? Maybe some of them you may recognize, like for example, if you speak Spanish and you see the word oculista, same word in Spanish, we just changed the K for the C, for example. In some countries, we use oculista, right? So you're using jirafa, maybe you don't know, but maybe jirafa, also in English, giraffe, something similar, not the same, but similar, right? So perhaps you can use your background knowledge, right? So this is print literacy, print reading, writing, right? So you're using your print literacy, the skills that you have to interact with new words that maybe you have never seen before. Maybe you have never seen Polish before, right? But look at the last one, skąd. Skąd, we don't have that particular character, or the with the little sign at the bottom here, the little little thing here at the bottom of the A, right? So this is new for us. We might guess what it is, but we're not going to be very sure, right? And that means from where, by the way. So skąd will be different, right? But the other two, you can figure it out when it comes to print literacy, because you can look into your own background knowledge. This is something I always tell my students. You're never starting from zero. I teach English, I teach Spanish in Poland, and I always tell them you're never starting from zero. You always bring your background, your skills from different parts of your experiences in life, skills about language, skills about culture, skills about anything, right? That you can use to interact with the language. Sometimes our students are reading or writing and they just don't see, they see a word and then they cannot understand it, or they don't know what it means. And sometimes they can make sense of it, especially from English to Spanish, right? But a lot of our students, they just kind of block themselves and they say, no, I don't know what this word means, instead of focusing on everything else, around the word and trying to figure it out. And I'm like, no, use your skills. You're not starting at zero, right? So this is something, again, for us to keep in mind, for us and for our students. So why are these examples important, Luis? And that's a very good question. 3 points that I want to highlight here. When we think about our world, we know that we're becoming more increasingly interconnected. For example, I live and work in Poland. I'm in Brazil right now, and I'm joining Colombia. And for all of us here, we're probably joining from different parts of the world, right? As you're watching me right now. So we're very much interconnected. But also the way that we interact with things around us, right? Anything. It could be going to the bank, it could be talking to people, sending messages. We know that when it comes to communication nowadays, we have to employ, deploy, and use many, many forms of literacies, of skills, right? reading icons, reading visual, memes. That's communication as well. So we're always in contact with not only text like before, but texts, images, videos, sounds, music, so many different elements that we're in contact with. And we're in contact with it, our students are in contact with it as well, right? So language is not like before anymore when they would print newspapers and that was the only form of communication. We know that's not language anymore. Language has evolved and we're using it in different ways now, right? What does that mean for us as language teachers? Well, it means that we also have to integrate and evolve our practice, integrate all of these forms of literacies if we are really committed to helping students succeed in their lives. Reading and writing for communication nowadays is only one part of the equation, right? Students have to be able to, again, like I shared with you, read cultural signs, read different elements that may or may not be in print. And as language teachers, we have to bring those elements into the classroom as well. So that was a little bit of an introduction, but our conversation today, depending on time, we might go a little bit faster through some of them, but I will introduce you to the concept of literacies and multiple literacies, and then why is it important and how to incorporate it, which is very, very important. And then within part 3, I'm going to go deeper into social emotional learning, which is really the core of our conversation today, okay? So what are multiple literacies? And we're very much aware and or we understand what literacy is, right? We know reading and writing. This is probably the most traditional form of or definition. When we think of literacy, we think someone who's able to read and write. Yes. Before, that was definitely the definition of literacy. If you were able to read and write, you were literate. Maybe that was correct in the 19th and 20th century, not so much anymore in the 21st century. In the 21st century, we have to go beyond. Reading and writing is essential and foundational, and we teach it in our classes, and as language teachers, we're very comfortable teaching reading and writing, but that's only part of the equation. That's not everything. Nowadays, we have what we call multiple literacies or multi-literacies. Many people call it different things, or literacies, depending on how we use it, right? But these are some examples here of different types of multiple literacies. These are just some of them, not all of them. We have civic literacy, emotional literacy, global. We're going to talk a little bit about global, numerical, financial, visual. I love visual literacy. It's my favorite, of course, because I'm a visual learner. Social literacy, we're going to go into that one as well. So there are different types of literacies, as you can see here. And as language teachers, we have to ask ourselves, how am I preparing my students to use the English language in a way that is going to help them successful around the world, right? Are they able to, for example, communicate through digital media or digital forms of communication, technological, digital literacy? When it comes to culture, are they able to use language, and that would be cultural literacy, are they able to use language in different cultures in a way that is respectful and in a way that it will be helpful to them, beneficial for them, professionally, personally, etc., right? So are they able going to read the signs, for example? Am I bringing different signs from different cultures that they might go into in contact with? For example, if they're learning English, they might want to visit English-speaking countries. Are we bringing signs and different visual elements that they can read from those countries, for example, right? So some things, food for thought here. I'm going to continue, but something here to keep in mind. So some of us might be asking ourselves at this point, well, Luis, why is it important for students to learn more than just reading and writing in the language, right? We already have the 4 language domains: speaking, listening, reading, writing. Yes, and those are essential and foundational. But again, that's just the beginning. When we think about the importance of bringing in other forms of abilities, skills, literacies, why? Well, research. We've been doing a lot of research outside of language education. We're a little bit behind in language education when it comes to research about literacies, but we see that teaching with multiple literacies in mind increases student motivation. Why? Because if you bring different elements, different activities beyond reading and writing or listening, students feel more motivated. We know this. We're teaching students in the 21st century. We bring a Kahoot game. Again, visual literacy is more kinesthetic. Students will be very, very, very interested in that, right? Usually they get motivated, they get excited about something different, right? Enhances student engagement and makes lessons relevant and I have an example applicable to the real world experience, right? So I'm going to show you later how to use multiple literacies in a particular assignment. Also, when it comes to multiple literacies and students helping, helping themselves and us helping students knowledge around the world, right? So knowledge on how to interact with the world, we learned that it increases when we use multiple literacies, increases adaptability, empathy, and resilience on students. Also, collaboration, critical thinking, these are social emotional competencies that when we incorporate multiple literacies, we do see an increase in students' social emotional competencies. Why are social emotional competencies important? Because when we use language, we usually use it with somebody else, with people. So we have to be competent. We have to have social and emotional abilities to interact with people successfully, right? To deal with communication breakdowns, to deal with anxiety or emotions that may not be helpful to you when you're engaging in communication. Some of us are introvert, for example. How do we deal with those emotions? Again, these are literacy skills, abilities that our students need. And last but not least, and we're going to go into examples now, but last and not least, when it comes to multiple literacies and why are they important, think about also as a teacher, and I'll give you some examples here, but also I want you to think as a teacher, our innovation really has an opportunity to flourish, right? Because when you have only, and you're focusing only on reading, writing, speaking, listening, the four language domains, those are only some abilities. We can only do so many activities, but then when you bring in activities for visual literacy to help students read the world, right? Or for global literacy, I'm going to give you some examples now. It also helps our creativity. And then students have the opportunity to be more creative as well, right? I want you to think about any others, and you can write it in the chat box. We're going to come back to them, but also think about multiple literacies. In what other ways or reasons do you think, why is multiple literacies important for us, for our students, also for us, for teachers, because it's very important for us as well. All right, so let me show you how multiple literacies can be included in our classroom, and I'll talk to you through some of them, and then we're going to go into social emotional learning specifically, okay? All right, so there are 4 different types that I want to highlight. There's so many more forms of literacies, but we don't have time for all of them. I don't even know if I know all of them because there's so many, and every year we have AI literacy, artificial intelligence literacy. We have to be literate in AI, which that's a different topic and discussion, so I'm not going to get into that. But I just want to focus on these 4 because they're very prevalent and very, very popular, I would say. Textual, we're the most comfortable with textual, visual, global, and social emotional. Let's start with textual literacy, and I have the definition here for you. And I'm bringing some examples from different books, and these books are especially from National Geographic, and I have another book from another publisher, but I bring different books here just to give you examples, okay? So this is textual literacy, the ability to understand, interpret, and respond to text from different sources and in different forms. Again, this is perhaps the type of literacy that we're the most comfortable with. Why? Because when it comes to textual literacy, print, reading, writing, teaching reading and writing, teacher preparation programs, they do prepare us very well or primarily to teach reading and writing, right? So we know different strategies when it comes to teaching reading and writing. When we're presenting new vocabulary, we have asked students, okay, so identify the setting, or what is the author's purpose? So we start asking questions so they can look at the particular text and they can identify the setting, or they can identify the purpose, or they can look for a specific vocabulary, or if they don't know a word in a sentence, can you make sense of this word in the context? Yes, no, So textual literacy, I feel that we are very comfortable, most of us, we feel very comfortable teaching reading and writing, right? But what about visual literacy? And please write your comments and your questions. I'm going to come back to them, okay? I cannot see them right now, but we will come back to them. So visual literacy, the ability to understand, analyze, and evaluate information presented through images, such as illustrations, photographs, signs, or symbols. Remember in the beginning where I shared with you the triangle and the circle? That's an example here of visual literacy. Okay, reading the signs. So I have a video that I want to show you because I've been doing, and it's going to be very few seconds only because of time, but I've been doing a lot of activities with my students where they have to embed visual literacy into our assignments. I'm trying to go beyond just teaching tests because tests or exams that they have to take, that's reading and writing, that's print literacy, that's only two skills. So I want them to produce different forms of and develop different forms of skills such as visual literacy. And some of my students, they do a lot of content for social media and things like that. So I've been trying to keep them engaged and motivated. So what we did was, and this was for a Spanish class, I'm going to show you now a few seconds, but for the Spanish class, what we did was instead of doing a final exam like I usually do, I asked my students to create a 2 to 3 minute like telenovela soap opera, and they had to use vocabulary that we had used throughout the year in the same way that I would do for a final exam, for example, that I evaluate the vocabulary. They had to create a story, all the elements that I needed to review. I added it. I'm going to show you now the rubric as well, but let me stop sharing here and share the video. Hold on. But that's what they did. They created videos, and that was their final project. So let me show you here very quickly. And I think this particular student did a fantastic, fantastic job. So I hope you like it. Here we go. Just a few seconds. It's in Spanish.
Mi amor, qué maravilloso que ya estemos casados. Siempre estaremos el uno con el otro. Compartiremos una vida juntos. Compartiremos una casa. Compartiremos un coche. Y tendremos planes de futuro juntos.
I'm going to stop it there. The video is 3 minutes long, but that's an example of, and I think she did a fantastic, fantastic job. And there were so many. I wanted to give you more examples, and it was hard to choose one video because my students really, really did a fantastic job. And I always tell my students, surprise me, be innovative, because I give them information. This is the information that I gave them, Spanish 3, digital storytelling, individually or in teams of 2 or 3. So that will be to your discretion, of course, as a teacher. Use digital tools to create and share a story in Spanish of 5 to 7 minutes. I thought it was 3 to 4, but no, 5 to 7 I added here. So the document needs to be submitted in the form of a video with voice recording, which is, and I always say here, be creative. I always add that at the end. Because creativity is one of the literacy skills that we need to develop in our students as well, especially now when we have AI. What can students do that is different from AI, right? Creative, be creative. AI is not very creative in my experience, right? So you can see here the criteria. You can take a screenshot. You're welcome to use the rubric as an example. So excellent, good, satisfactory, needs improvement. I'm looking for, instead of having a final exam or doing an essay or something like that, I wanted them to use different forms of literacy, visual literacy. You see how she had pictures and, she had pictures and things like that. Also, I wanted them to be more technological, right? So technological literacy, different skills that I want them to use. And I'm still evaluating the same thing, the use of language, the content, in here a little bit more of technological, skills here, but technological execution, engagement and impact, things like that, right? And I told them, because many of them create content, so I told them, if you like and you really feel proud of it, you can share the content later on in your social media. Some of them did. So, this also keeps them motivated as well, because this is the reality nowadays, right? So students do share a lot of content through social media. Many of them may be influencers, so this is something that you can also ask them to do. Let's go into the next one, which is global literacy. Very important for all of us. The ability to read and understand the world and your place in it. It deals with sustainability and global citizenship, acknowledging that we share a common humanity. So when we think about global literacy, and this may or may not be in your textbooks, like this is an example of how it could be embedded in the textbook already, where you have activities where you talk about farming and the future of farming, so reading activities that talk about farming and climate change, and bees and protecting bees, and the importance of bees and planting, and carbon dioxide. So learning vocabulary and information about the world. So global literacy, learning about specifically climate change, is very important. They may be already in your textbook, but if they're not in your textbook, then thinking as teachers, how can we incorporate activities like these into our classroom, right? Most of the textbooks that I use, to be honest, they do not have global literacy embedded in it. So it's really my responsibility as a teacher, because I know my students, and to be honest, my students are very literate when it comes to global literacy. They're very, very, very aware of what's happening around the world, and they're very worried about it. So we do talk about global literacy in our classes. So I'm very grateful to them, because they have taught me a lot, and they tell me, let's talk about this, and I'm glad to talk to them anytime, of course. But as teachers, we're responsible to bring in these conversations and talk about global literacy. Okay, so do we know what's happening? What changes can we do? Are we recycling? Things like this. The recycling efforts on campus, in the university, at the institutions where we work, or places where we work. Conversations like this are always very important, and of course we're using English, so that's the most important. Last but not least, social emotional literacy, and I'm going to spend the last 10-15 minutes on social emotional literacy. And I gave you already some examples, so you can see different forms of literacies, abilities, but this one in particular, social emotional literacy. I keep telling my friends and colleagues as language teachers, some of us may be worried a little bit, especially as AI becomes more prevalent. How can we teach in a way that is different, right? Or what can we do that AI cannot do? Well, we can help students develop the social and emotional, the human skills that makes us different from computers, right? So that's what social emotional literacy is, the ability to read, recognize, and respond appropriately to emotions or feelings, both in ourselves and others. And also to be able to deal with different situations, social situations. An example here, How to Behave and Why. This particular book, it's a very, very old book. I think it's over 100 years, or close to 100 years now. But I was teaching high school in the US, and we were having a lot of issues with misbehavior and violence in the classroom. And as a new teacher, I didn't know much, to be honest, about literacies and different skills. And I just had this mentality of I have to teach reading and writing, speaking and listening, and that's it. I did not know, because again, my teacher preparation programs did not prepare me for this. So I don't know how, but I started reading with my students. I said, you know what, something needs to change. This is not working. So every Friday we started doing reading circles, as I would call it back then. I didn't have the vocabulary of social emotional literacy or social emotional learning back then. I didn't have that vocabulary. I didn't know about it, but I did know that we had to do something different. And we started reading about moral values and about ethics. And this book was very good. You can take a look here, honesty, honest, friendly. So we talked about different moral values, and it was non-judgmental, right? So what do you think about honesty? Is this correct for you? Yes, no. Generosity, all of these things that we talked about. And I started slowly seeing a shift on my students' perspective, the way that they behaved. It took time, but we did see an improvement, because then they could become self-aware. They could think about their own decisions, their own actions, and how that affected them, how it affected those around them, and how it affected the teacher. I'm the teacher, Luis, because of course we get affected by our students' behavior as well. At the end of that project, this is one of the final, the project assignments that I had at the end, and I really like this particular visual, because I asked my students to write us an essay, a paragraph. This is level 1, so I think they had been in school for like 4-6 months at this point. So this was very hard for them, but they did it. And one paragraph talking about, they had to identify one value that they've really connected with in the book. And here we see generosity, and they have to explain why. and they have to show a visual about generosity. And I really like this one because you can see here in the bottom that it looks like under the second one on the bottom. So it looks like someone is pushing the other person. And then I asked my student, this is not generosity. He's like, no, 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 no. The person fell and is picking him up. And it's like, okay, that's better. So yes, that's definitely generosity. So again, having opportunities to talk about social and emotional aspects of living, of using language. How do we use language in a social and emotionally responsible way? The reality is that whether we like it or not, more and more, and we're seeing this in our field, we're seeing this in education, we're recognizing and realizing, and this book is from 2005, that, and I'm going to read this to you. Today's neuroscientists are breaking new ground in helping us understand why emotion is an important learning variable and how the affective side, everything connected to social and emotional literacy skills of learning, is the critical interplay between how we feel, act, and think. Mind and emotions are not separate. Emotions, thinking, and learning are all linked. And as language teachers, you may have experienced this, you might be experiencing it right now, that sometimes when our students are in our classroom, but they're not really present, they're not learning. So that's why I'm a very, very strong advocate for social emotional skills and social emotional learning, which is thinking about students as human beings first, right? So what values do they bring into the classroom? What values can we develop together in the classroom through English? Whether it's, and I'm gonna go back here, whether it's through reading circles, in using books, How to Behave and Why. There are other books out there that you can read with your students. You can create your own stories or just have little, you just talk about one day, and this is something that I started doing with my students as well. What do you all think about honesty? What is honesty? And just ask questions and let's talk about it. They're using English. They can write about it. I have other examples here. But again, social emotional learning, pretty much our approach to helping students develop social emotional skills, the ability to interact with others in a way that is going to be beneficial for everyone, to recognize their emotions, to regulate their emotions. I always like to say social emotional learning is the way that we teach to create a better world. I really think so, and I really believe so, and that's why I'm very passionate about social emotional learning. So it's more than just teaching English. It's teaching English with a purpose, to make our communities better, to help our students grow as human beings, and to make the world better. When we think of social emotional learning, I'm going to show you some more examples. Some of you may already be doing social emotional learning, helping students develop social emotional skills, literacies. And maybe you don't call it that. Maybe you call it something else. Some of you might call it mindfulness. Some of you might call it restorative practices. Some of you might call it culturally responsive teaching. These are all examples of social emotional learning. Social emotional learning is this big umbrella, and I like to see it as a big umbrella where all of these practices that we do, that at the end of the day focus on helping students as a human being, their social and emotional skills, to help them grow as human beings in addition to learning English. That's social emotional learning. Okay, so some of you may already be doing a lot of this, but some of us are also very much aware of the Cassell framework. If you're not, check it out. It's perhaps the most prevalent, the most popular one, but it's not the only framework. Okay, so I add here SEL is more than Cassell. Okay, and I do recommend that you check out Harvard ESOL Lab. They have so many frameworks and so many activities and practices that you can use as social emotional learning in your classroom. And some people might say, well, Luis, but this might work well with, children, but maybe not with adults. Well, actually, it is for everyone. And for young people, usually SEL focuses more on development of the foundational habits or skills, regulation, cooperation, empathy, more of a habits in the classroom, right? So that's how we engage in habits. So when someone is speaking, okay, remember, someone is speaking, let take wait for your turn, and we start developing routines in the classroom. If we already have routines, that's social emotional learning, by the way. So to help students become more empathetic with their classroom community. Without that, it would be very hard to teach. We know that as teachers. But also, it is for teens and adults. right? But for teens and adults, it's a little bit different. SEL, we tend to focus more on interpersonal communication skills. For example, in my classrooms, when I'm in Poland at the university, I teach university students, and many of them are very worried about speaking because they're anxious or they're introverts. So we talk a lot about, okay, so how do you manage anxiety? Or how do you manage communication breakdown? Because for some of them, especially for shy students or students who are introvert, the worst thing that can happen is that you're speaking and then there is silence because they see it as a communication breakdown, right? Okay, but how do you deal with that? Because in the real world, at work, in life, if you want to be successful, you have to know the skills, communicative skills, to deal with that because you're going to feel emotional, whether anxiety, stress, and anything that you may or may not want at that point. But how do you deal with that? In addition of we have to be able to break that communication breakdown. You have to be able to bring it together again and continue that communication, right? So some strategies I always tell my students, they can have something like, can you repeat that again, please? I didn't hear. Or can you speak slower? If there is a moment of silence because they couldn't understand what someone said. Giving students techniques, phrases, strategies. I tell my students, if you're feeling stressed when you're talking in public, and this is a strategy that one of my teachers gave me, add something in your hand and hold it and think that all of your anxious energy is going to that item. It could be a pen, for example. This is a pen. So just hold the pen. And when you're speaking, just hold the pen tight. Now I don't need to use it anymore. But before, I needed an item to hold. So all my anxiety would go there. It really helped me with speaking, right? So we explore different techniques. And I think we're getting close to the end here, but why is this important? Well, more than anything, I'm just going to signal here to the Future of Jobs Report 2025. Check it out, download it, it's for free. But take a look at the different types of literacies that we're going to need. Specifically, the second one, the future dynamic nature of the workforce will require social emotional literacies. More and more jobs are looking for individuals who are socially and emotionally intelligent. If you do not have the ability to interact, cooperate, and be successful with people who are different from you, jobs, it will be hard for you to be successful at your job place. Okay, so I want to thank everyone. This is my email, my website, and connect with me also on Instagram. I have an Instagram now because my students told me that that's for what young people do, because Facebook is for old people, they said. So check it out and please join me there. Any questions that you may have, I'm glad to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pentan Herrera. It's been great having you. We just wanted to have a couple of minutes for questions that are in our chat. So, after listening to you, there were a couple of ideas here about literacies. And there is a very specific question from Isaac Daniel. He's asking, can gaming be a literacy category by its own? What do you think about gaming as a literacy and what impact does it have?
That's amazing. Thank you for that question, Isaac. And yes, gaming, let me tell you, I do know a lot of teachers who are now incorporating gaming, and they call it gaming, by the way. And I think, Isaac, you might be wondering if this is more like video gaming but I'm going to say game-based learning. That's a terminology. And yes, it's very, very much connected to different types of literacies. There is a lot of creativity, problem resolution skills that you have to have when you're in games, a healthy competition as well, because in games you will lose and win. So if you lose, how do you manage those emotions? There's so many skills that you can learn from gaming. But as teachers, we have to be creative on how are we going to incorporate this in a way that is going to help us, right? So Kahoot is a game, for example, but if it's also, think about like video games, okay, you can incorporate video games, but how is that going to look like? And there are some, not a lot, but there are some publications out there now that talk about using video games and creating video games as learning tools. So there are definitely conversations out there. But yes, 100% video games are different forms of literacy as well. Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one last question, and it is related to um, disabilities. What about people with disabilities? Somebody asked here in the chat. Do we have any inclusive literacies?
Oh, that's a great question. The literacies is for everyone. It doesn't discriminate on ability or disability. It's people's way of learning different skills that they need to interact with the world. Now, ability and disability is a little bit different. That will be going more into special needs, but social emotional learning, literacies in general, is for everyone. Everyone can develop, for example, critical thinking. Everybody can develop visual literacy, reading the signs or reading specific vocabulary. So it's a little bit different, but social emotional learning, we have seen that is for everyone. Everyone, of course, we do have to think about also when we're incorporating activities or different elements that we bring of our pedagogy into the classroom, differentiation is important for different students. But social emotional learning is for everyone, whether you're a student with disability or not.
Thank you very much, Dr. Penton Herrera, and thank you everyone in the chat. They're making great comments. They're very happy to have participated in the session. They say, let's start by making changes in our classrooms and ourselves. The world needs these kind of conversations.
I'm glad to hear.
Adriana says, I love that about dealing with frustration. It is such an important skill for
It's
everyone.
yes, yes. As human beings, as speakers of any language, 100%.
And Isaac keeps saying, I think we can extrapolate social emotional literacy to discussing moral and ethical dilemmas. It is a game changer for our students. So, well,
Yes.
you can see that we could spend hours talking about social emotional learning. I really hope that everybody is taking a bit of what we discussed today and applying it in the classroom. And on behalf of the organizing committee of the National ELT, thank you, Dr. Penton, for being with us. Thanks. Let's thank Macmillan Education, part of Springer Nature, for bringing this important conversation into our agenda today. We're gonna definitely be talking about it and keep the conversation going with our teachers and students. Thank you so much.
Joanna, thank you. And thank you to Macmillan once again. And thank you to everyone for your kind comments and questions. Connect with me. I'm glad to answer any more questions. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Oh,
Que vamos a aprender todos también.
ok. Salimos. ¿Y si yo vuelvo, él se fue? ¿Ya lo perdí?
Eh,
Supongo que sí.
Creo que sí,
Hola.
lo perdimos.
¿Se fue?
Cerró.
Sin hacer despedir. ¿Sí?
Sí, ya se despidió.
¡Ah!
Lo cerró.
Lo cerraste.
Creo que sí.
¿Dónde estaba el QR?
Estaba ahí ya abierto.
Oh.
Eso